We'll see if Spotify comes out of nowhere with this $100 million deal with freaking.
See, here's my theory on Spotify, bro, because this happened literally the week I start my own fucking podcast. I've been building up to this shit for at least a year. I've been talking about starting this thing for the last year. I even was emailing on my email list, hey guys, we're starting a podcast in 2019, so get ready. And I fucking sat on it for a year. Talk about speed of implementation. And then this fucking Joe Rogan deal hits. And I'm like, yo, I felt the wave of video podcasts on YouTube coming in 2018, 2019, and it hit. And I knew I missed it. But then I was like, you know what? I love podcasts. It's basically all I consume. So I want to start my own, and I'm not going to let the fact that I'm now a year late get my own. And so then this hits, and I'm like, yo, how does this change the game for me? And so when he announced that, I was like, it could be either really good or really bad. Here's why it could be really bad. It could be really bad because when Joe Rogan leaves YouTube and he deletes all of his podcasts off of YouTube and moves them all exclusively only over to Spotify. All right. Now do video podcasts on YouTube become irrelevant the way vlogging became irrelevant last year?
That's a good question.
So that's the downside that could happen.
Or does it just shift to Spotify?
That's what I'm saying.
The videos are going to Spotify. So maybe the new platform where you can go rapidly or whatever. That's why they're trying to like lead the movement. They're trying to get the leader of podcasts say, hey, we're the platform. Say your voice. We're not going to control you. Do what you want. Here's Spotify.
Yeah. And I think on the same line of thinking, though, is like, what if, because this is the only thing I'm unsure about. Is there a barrier to entry to Spotify? Because if there's a barrier to entry to where you have to be Joe Rogan to get on Spotify, and the only video podcasts allowed on Spotify are people invited by Spotify and getting paid by Spotify. Because if it becomes a barrier to entry, now it's almost like if you only have a video podcast on YouTube, it's like, okay, that's cool, but you're not on Spotify because there's a barrier to entry. And so now it's like, think about it like this. Throughout history, people consumed on the radio, and then they consumed on TV, making the radio irrelevant. Then they consumed on the internet, which kind of made TV irrelevant, and TV's dying out. It's getting less views on fucking normal shows than someone's live stream on YouTube. And so now the reason that YouTube and the internet blew up is because the number one difference between radio and television is that there was no barrier to entry. Anybody could post something on YouTube. And because there was no barrier to entry, it created all these different people who had even an inkling to create and grow an audience and show up on camera. And so that made TV irrelevant because TV still had a barrier to entry. If you were on TV, that's cool, but you can go on YouTube and get a bigger following. Now, here's why the Spotify deal is even more interesting, because if they leave up a barrier to entry, it could almost be like they are the next television, to where now you're irrelevant unless you're on Spotify, but there's that barrier to entry. The flip side of that is, well, if Joe Rogan's off Spotify, then someone's got to come up and be the next number one.
On YouTube.
On YouTube.
That means that there's a competition.
Yeah.
There's a competition on now. And now that your podcast, your video podcast is an asset that you can sell to Spotify.
Yes.
It's a ticket. That's why I think that it's exciting for everybody. I think that if you frame it that way, you're competitive. I think that this could be the biggest opportunity, because I watched a video, Valuetainment. This guy did a video on it, and he was saying how they paid him $100 million for this contract. And boom, within 48 hours, it shot up $5 billion. Their stock increased. It increased by $5 billion. So everybody's going to say, hey, here's a freaking $100 bill. I'll take $5,000.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to go to that slot machine. So now the value, Joe Rogan's worth $5 billion because he added $5 billion, of value to the marketplace.
And he's like a professional athlete because it's like a 3 or 4 year deal. And it's free game. He can go wherever he wants after 4 years. Yeah. Who's next? Who's willing to pay the next higher ticket? You know?
100%. That's insane that he's got, So now it's, these podcasters, these people with audiences almost become like you said, football players, or not players, but teams. They almost become like franchises that you can buy and monetize. And so that's why I think it's so exciting, for you to be starting, and then eventually, I'll start my own podcast. And I think it's awesome, man.